everyone. Welcome to the Mashtia Collective podcast. My name is Anna.
And my name is Juliana.
This is a space where we share about, ideas, stories, thoughts, opinions on everything creativity related.
That's true. What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about the famous 10,000 hour theory, which was, in case you haven't heard about it, it was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers. And it was basically like this theory on how someone can achieve a certain level of mastery or expertise in a field. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what the theory consists of?
Yeah. So the theory, as you said, was popularized in this book Outliers, in which he pretty much interviews a whole bunch of people and does case studies on particular people like Bill Gates and like the Beatles, for example. And the theory consists in that for you to be able to master an art or master a science or master a craft, you need to put in 10,000 hours of work consistently or practice, say, for example. So, for example, one of the studies he pulled from Malcolm Gladwell was a study done, I believe it's like the Berlin Symphony Orchestra or the Berlin Conservatory, where they grabbed a whole bunch of violinists and they broke them down into like different proficiency levels. And the ones that were the best at it were the ones that had practiced 10,000 hours or more. So that's and that's kind of what got the idea started. And that study has been cited over 6,000 times by many people who have pulled that kind of as source of information for like to back up the theory of the 10,000 hours.
Right. And I think that, as with any theory, it has obviously its ardent supporters.
Yeah.
And it also has its critics, people who, disagree on some level or completely, and they're just like, no, this is rubbish. And there's some people who are like, oh, well, but with some nuisance. And then there's other people who like might take it truly to heart, and they're just like, I need to put in my 10,000 hours. Right. Exactly. And then, kind of I will be expert of my craft once that 10,000 hours have been hit. And I don't know, I mean, personally, so as a disclaimer, I haven't actually read the book. So I've heard of this theory. I don't know if it was via a TED Talk by Carla Sosa, the actress who played, I can't remember the character's name, but she played the Mexican-American character in How to Get Away with Murder. And she's like a super well-known Mexican-American art. She's also Mexican-American, right?
I believe so.
But she's like a very like super well-known and proficient artist. And I think and she did a TED Talk, and in it she mentions the book. So I'm gonna assume that she is, or at least till the time that she did the TED Talk, she was probably one of the proponents and supporters of this theory, because she was like, I want to put in my 10,000 hours, or I've already put in my 10,000 hours, whatever. And she kept like citing it and referencing it. And that was like the first time that I probably heard about it. And then I know that I heard it from you as well. But I never fully like dove deep into it, just because personally, and if you've heard some of our previous episodes on like our rules and guidelines in creativity, or I don't know, like maybe some of the other ones that we've done, I'm not a very like quantity oriented person. Yeah. So already, or like I hate those kind of like strict rules and guidelines around like creativity related things. Not that I think that everything should be super willy-nilly and just like, so free-spirited that you don't have absolutely no structure. But I think I was just it never appealed to me to actually go and read the book and get more acquainted with the theory, just because already I was a little bit put off by it.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's very like...
But I don't know. I feel like there is some I think there's some room for nuance that we can go into. Yeah. But just like the banner in itself, or the way that it can be transmitted, because that like a lot of people will get a theory or an idea, and a lot of us won't do the work to look further into it or whatnot. And so, but what gets replicated is like, that rule. It's the same with the 10,000 steps, right? Like, a lot of people haven't looked into the theory, haven't looked into the studies, like, I've just heard that we have to walk 10,000 steps a day. Yeah. And so, you keep kind of replicating the idea without looking further into it. So I think in this case, I was just like kind of turned off by the wording of it. Yeah. So Yeah, you?
Yeah, I think, and I see why you were probably turned off by the wording of it, because it's very like, it's a very like telling you what to do kind of idea or theory or like whatever you want to call it, and it like for sure it has some nuance, but I think similarly to the 10,000 steps, it's like it's not a hard and fast, like in my mind it's not like a hard rule, you know, it
Right.
like then and it's been, if you Google it, like if you Google the 10,000 hours myth, you'll find that loads of people, I was reading a BBC article actually just before we started recording, that loads of people have actually demystified it, like it's not necessarily the case, because it is one thing to put in 10,000 hours of work, or 10, like say, for example, let's go back to the violinist study. I play the violin and I have probably put in well over 10,000 hours of practice, but I can't say that all of those hours of practice have been quality practice. Some of them were just like playing around, some of them were just like exploratory, some of them were more technical and more, so I think it depends on the quality of your practice and the quality of the time you're spending honing in your craft. I think as a general rule, the more time you spend doing something, the better you get at that thing. It's like when you start a new job. When you started your job currently, and when I started my previous job, or even started to be a freelancer, it was really hard to learn, or like to do it, to kind of hit the ground running, because you have no idea what you're doing. And so the more you do it, the better you get at it. And there's a point where you can do your entire work week in probably 2 days, because now you're so good at it that it's you don't have to think about it. Yeah. So I think similarly with anything else, the more time you put into it, the better you get at the thing, regardless of whatever that is. For certain things, I think it's important to be very intentional with the time that you put into it, with the practice, the level of practice that you're doing. For me, for example, an example that I can think of is remember when we got into yoga and we were like doing a lot of yoga with Adrienne, like in COVID. Like, I was never aspiring to be a yogi because my yoga was so subpar. Like I could barely hold a pose for more than a second, and I was always shaking with like warrior pose. And and I was like I do it to move and whatever, but I'm not gonna think that I'm a yogi because I'm not doing it properly. Whereas probably someone who puts in 1,000 hours of quality yoga practice or quality tennis practice, and you do build that muscle memory, and in doing things you do build that muscle memory. That's why I still pick up my violin, even though I probably don't practice as much as I did when I was a student, and I can still play yoga scale perfectly in tune, because I have the muscle memory that I honed in over many hours of practice. But it doesn't mean that 10,000 hours is a blanket statement. And I think that's where it's problematic, because people can think, I'll just play the guitar for 10,000 hours, but you never really learn chords, and you never really learn form and technique, then you're not doing anything. You're just making it worse.
Totally. And I think that that's the part where like the feedback also comes in, and the collaborative aspect, because like, with something like writing, for example, people say like, or with comedy, it's one example as well. You need the feedback in order to get better. It's not enough to just do it on your own. You know what I mean? So like if you're just writing, and I can put in 10,000 hours like in front of my computer and write and write and write, but if no one ever sees my work, I don't know if I'm actually becoming a better writer. If I like never actually hear from like different voices or different perspectives. And like it's the same with comedy. Like you can be, in your house writing comedy or whatever, but if you never go out and try the new material, for example, and see how it's being received, you don't know if your jokes are actually funny, or you know what I mean, or like it just in different way. Because like with yoga with Adrian, for example, like I never aspired to be a yogi either, but I could feel that after a month of doing it or something, like I could, I wasn't shaking as soon as I like lifted a leg up, or as soon as I hit like 10 seconds with a plank, like I could tangibly feel in myself doing it better. Of course, if I wanted to pursue it more, then it would make sense to like seek a teacher or some sort of training to make sure that my technique and my form is good. But even on my own, like I could feel it in myself, the improvement. But there are some things where I do think that you need kind of that like feedback. And so that's where you come in, where you're like, it's just not enough to provide that like numerical framework of how much you want to practice, but also what's the quality of it. And sometimes the quality does require like, bringing in someone else to teach you. And of course, that part like it will play into the 10,000 hours. But yeah, I guess the point is more like this blanket statement leaves the story a bit incomplete as to what putting in that time should actually require. It's not just the time per se.
Yeah, no, for sure. It is a very, very incomplete blanket statement, as you were saying. I do think, though, that in anything, some things, as you were saying, need more feedback and are more nuanced than others, obviously, because it's the nature of different crafts. But in everything, you will find improvement if you do something over and over again. I mean, yes and no, because you also kind of need the guidance. So that's kind of like the thing. Like different for when you're doing something physical, like cycling. We used to live near an area of the city that was very hilly. Yeah, it was this like massive hill that if you wanted to go down to the bike path, where if you wanted to do like bike around the seawall in Vancouver, there's this massive seawall that connects like the entire city pretty much, and you can do it running, walking, or biking, and it's great for like exercise, and when the weather's getting nice, it's a great way to get active. So if you wanted to bike down to seawall, you had to go down this hill. Downhill, no problem, but when you had to come back up, you either had to like cycle up the hill, and I'm talking big problem, and I'm talking like it wasn't 90 degrees because it's almost impossible, but it was pretty up there, like,
very close.
A solid 45-degree hill, like very, very solid.
More than 45, way more than 45.
Way more, like maybe a 60 degree. I don't know. Yeah, it was a very, very steep hill, and the first few times that I went cycling, I had to get off my bike and walk my bike up the hill because it wasn't gonna happen. I wasn't gonna get up the hill like with my legs were not capable of doing it. Plus, I just didn't want to do it. But then over the first summer that I was cycling consistently, like towards the end of the summer, say I started cycling in May, say August, I could get, or like in July, I could get up half the hill, because this was like 3 blocks of hill, so it wasn't just one burst, it was like a long sustained hill. And then say in August, I could get up the whole hill because you don't need that much guidance, it's just pedaling forward. You're not, and then of course you can get you can get a technique, and you know, probably someone will say like ollie forward so you're more aerodynamic, or you know, go all the way down in your gears. There's different ways to make cycling easier, but in essence, you pedal up. That's all you have to do, you know? Yeah. Whereas, for example, if you're playing the violin, if you practice something over and over again, you will find, and I say the violin because it's my biggest example, it's what I've done for so many years, you will feel an improvement, but if you don't have the guidance to know what you're doing, then you don't know how that improvement looks like. So I see what you're saying. Like you need that feedback to tell you how it looks like. But I also feel like not necessarily, like yes and no, because for example, another thing I do is taking photos, and I've never had. I mean, I've had feedback. I said, you tell me, oh, this photo's great, but like I haven't had like a professional photographer come in and be like, oh, you're, you know, because it's a lot of like developing the eye, and I've done it for probably like, not 10,000 hours, but a solid 5,000 hours invested in taking photos, and I can feel the improvement without need for feedback. Like I feel like I'm getting better, and my mind is seeing, like I look up and I see a photo way easier than I used to when I didn't do it consistently, without necessarily having, I don't know, because I feel like some things are more like subjective than others. So improvement is very subjective. Like you can get better at like tangible things, like looking up and seeing a photo, or like thinking of jokes, or like things like that. And then the objective thing is, like, is this photo objectively good, or is this joke objectively good, or is this poem objectively good? But you get better when you do it over and over again. You get better at coming up with ideas. You get better at executing your ideas forward. Yeah, I don't know, because I feel like, sorry, just to close this thought, I feel like there's two types of creative practice. There are the ones that are idea forward and imaginative and creative out of nowhere. And then there's the practice where, like, playing an instrument, where you can make things out of nowhere with an instrument, but you can also just play what Bach wrote, you know? Right. And that's more similar to an athlete than it is to a creator in my mind, because it's a lot of muscle memory and practice. A lot of the things that a tennis player would do is like swing the ball many times, and you do drills and drills and drills. Same with violin, you play the same scale over and over again. But then that doesn't necessarily mean that you can come up with brand new musical concepts, you know, because you don't have that muscle. So I think for some of those things, you need the feedback to make sure that you're getting closer to that thing. But then for other things, it's just building up that muscle, and that does take time. But it's that quality time, and if you don't know what quality time looks like, it's really hard to have that quality time.
Yeah, of course. I think that definitely like the discipline, and also the discipline matters, but also the like the purpose, right, for what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing it. So like in your case, or in our case, we both started cycling, but I never thought to like I will become a cyclist. So it doesn't matter how many, yes, I might have gotten better, but it doesn't, I wasn't tracking hours. I wasn't like thinking too much about form, except in terms of like, does my posture like hurt? Will my back be sore after this or something like that? But I wasn't like intentionally putting the hours. At least my understanding of this theory, it's like you put in the 10,000 hours, but in those things that you actually want to become like, more proficient or masterful at. Because in my head, I'm like, can we do it for, or should we as humans like do it for absolutely everything, every endeavor that, you know what I mean? Like if I'm just doing dance or yoga for like myself, should I be thinking like, oh, I need to reach the 10,000 hours in yoga, and I also need to reach the 10,000 hours in writing, and I need to reach the 10,000 hours in dancing, and I need to reach
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, or I'm like, no, actually, what I want is, if I want to be a published author one day, I'm going to want to put in my 10,000 hours, quote unquote,
Yeah.
in writing. That's like my focus. If the other things, like I end up putting in 10,000 hours, like great, but I, like it does it the quality of the practice or all this other considerations that we're talking about weren't as high up on my list, because it wasn't like my main focus, as opposed to being like, no, I want to be more intentional. Because I think like the 10,000 hour for me, and that's the part where I start to see like the nuance of it. It's like, and a part of the helpfulness of it, it's like, I think what it communicates is, if you have a goal, it will take time, and it will take sacrifice, and it will take intentionality. And I can't remember what episode we talked about. I think it was the practices or something like that, or the life mode. I can't remember. It was one of our past episodes in which we talked about like the intentionality. And I think that matters a lot. And so I think that if it's like one thing that we kind of choose, and it's like, this is the part that I'm trying to focus on, then like being intentional in putting the time and wanting to get better at this one thing. Like, of course, we'll, just like in the ebbs and flows of life, we'll naturally get better at many things. But I think that for me, at least, a 10,000 hour was like, oh, it's like, what is the thing that you want to like actually truly achieve mastery at?
Yeah. And I think that's where the theory breaks, because I think because you don't need 10,000 hours when you have really good intentionality in things. And at the same time, you will inevitably reach 10,000 hours of intentional thinking in your life in many areas, even if they're not the area that you wanna be master for. For example, in my case, I'm a wife, for example, and I haven't been a wife for 10,000 hours yet, maybe just 10,000 hours, and those are intentional hours of being a wife. It's not a creative practice, but I'm still getting better at that, like unintentionally, just because I'm living life. So for me, the theory breaks in that moment where you quantify time, intentional time, because for me it's way more worth it to spend 1, 2, 3 hours of quality time doing something than it is to try to chase a number just for the sake of chasing a number. So I think that's where it breaks, because what you're saying is like unintentionally, by living, you're gonna put in time in things, and so that time is gonna help you get better at different things. But the thing that you wanna get better and master, your craft or your creative projects, or even creative thinking and design thinking, getting better at that takes intentionality. And that's where like I've met people that just started designing, for example, and haven't done 10,000 hours, and are amazing designers, because it's a perfect combination of talent and intentionality. That's another thing too. You can like you can force talent and you can get better at things, but if you're not talented, it's really hard to then do intentional time at getting better at something that you're not good at. And that's just how it is, you know. And we've talked about it before. There's things that like I cannot sing. I have a great ear, but I can't sing. So I'm not talented at singing. Even if I put in 10,000 hours of intentional singing time, it's not gonna come up to anything, because I'm not talented. So that's also a factor too. And I think one of the problems with this theory is that it creates expectation in people, thinking that if they just put in 10,000 hours, they can be good at things. And then you have the people that show up at American Idol that cannot sing, and that's still like audition because they're like, well, I've put in all of this time, and it's like, what do you mean I can't sing? Because I haven't had the feedback. as you were saying,
Yeah.
of people be like, girl, sit down, you can't sing. And they haven't had and they just don't have the talent. So I think it's that like sweet combination of like talent and intentionality and having the right circumstances that I feel like make the theory break, because you can't force that. You can't. You get better at things you're not talented at? Absolutely, 100%. You know, there's many things that are a practice. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that I think when I sort of like talked about like the feedback aspect, it was not because it's like absolutely, and it's even counterintuitive for me to be saying it, because you know how I'm like, I actually very welcome feedback, but solicited feedback, kind of hate unsolicited feedback, but also like, because in my writing specifically, I'm not talking about every area of my life, but in my writing specifically, I get very attached to my words. So sometimes it can be a little bit like, you know, like a little bit sensitive with it or whatnot. But even I recognize that at the end of the day, like if I'm just holed up in my, you know, in my room, writing and writing and writing, and I never get some sort of like a bit of an outside perspective. I mean, it's not only about like getting critique or having someone say like you suck, but it's like more of that, getting that outside perspective, because we can get very into our heads. And with something like singing, for example, you can, as you say, like I could be in my home, you know, there's like apps now or something where you can like sing into it and they'll tell you if you're playing well or singing well, I mean. But still, like you're going to go out in the world, and you know, if you ever want to, and again, this is like with the premise that it's something that you actually want to achieve mastery at, to do something with it. And not just like for, you know, for fun or as a hobby. It's like, no, you might actually like still be bad at it, not have realized, just because like you put in the 10,000 hours. And then, you know, same is with like language learning, for example. Like you can go to classes and buy all the textbooks and listen to the podcast and do worksheets and do whatever. But if you never talk to a native speaker, you might put in your 10,000 hours and then go and listen to a conversation and you won't understand half the slang and the abbreviations.
Streak, but
but exactly. And then you won't actually be able to communicate. So I think that it's like, if it's like, provided that it's something that you actually want to achieve mastery at, and like do something with it, like I don't know, whether it's like get a job or get a partner or showcase your work or whatever it is, like, you know, in Carla's case, that she was doing the TEDx, she's like actually auditioning for films and TV and like going to theater school or acting school. So she like wants to be an actress and whatnot. And I think in that case, I do think that you need kind of the feedback, because you know, whatever you do with it will inevitably involve someone else's evaluation or approval or whatnot. You know what I mean? Like if your goal is to eventually publish a book, you will need the approval of a publisher or an editorial house. Even if you do self-publishing, then people actually need to buy it.
Exactly.
So you know what I mean? So I feel like that's kind of
and I feel like
I don't know where I was going, but
no, I feel like it connects back to like the premise of our podcast, that everybody has something to teach and everybody has something to learn. And feedback can look many different ways. It can be a person you pay to coach you, you know, a writing coach or a voice coach or whatever, like a very like specific transactional relationship. But it can also be, and this is why I think also the 10,000 hours kind of break, because the 10,000 hours shouldn't be 10,000 hours or a set amount of time of doing the same thing over and over again. For me, part of the 10,000 hours is also spending time, or part of the time that I'm being intentional. For example, for me, for music, is spending time listening to what other people are doing and being very intentional in my listening, breaking things down, trying to listen to layers, listen to harmony, listen to all these things. For me, that's part of it. For an actor, an actor or an actress, it might be watching films and looking at people performing. You know, like I think, and that's also a way to get feedback. It doesn't necessarily have to be, of course, not on your own work, but you can learn from others by intentionally seeing what others are doing and intentionally doing it in a way that you are humble enough to want to learn from others as well. And also peers, and also people that have nothing to do with what you're doing. Like, you know, people that are not writers, for in your case, and that you can send them you send me samples of your work, and I like happily read them, and I always love them. And I'm like, I might have two thoughts, but in my mind, I'm like, I'm not a writer, so I don't know. So it's kind of like, it's that kind of collective that makes the human experience of creativity so great.
Yeah.
Is that it's not just for you, but it's to share with others, and that's why others are doing it too. Because when you put your work out there, your work is out there for it to be enjoyed, for it to be critiqued, and for it to be learned from, and many other things. But if you put your work out there, you're willing to put it out there so others can learn from it, and vice versa, because you've also learned from others. So it's all continuing to cross-pollinate work.
Yeah.
So I think that's also important, and something that I haven't seen any of the 10,000 hour people, like not just Malcolm Gladwell, but any other people that like have continued to propagate this theory, talk about that it looks like many different things. It doesn't just look like you sit there and play your scales, or you sit there and write your words. It's many different inputs that make you the creator you want to be.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think that the learning aspect should be part of the 10,000 hours for sure. Because again, it depends on the field that it is. I think it's a big part of it. And as something that you were saying as well before, it's like so much goes into or is the result of those 10,000 hours, which might be kind of side things and unintended consequences of something, but it can also be like, just part of it. So like, for example, as you were saying, like, with writing or something, you may become a better, thinker or something, but there's truly no way to quantify that, that much. But of course it comes like as a byproduct of the time that you're spending, learning things as well, or like you might become a more patient person or something like that, just like those kind of unintended byproduct of something. And I think that those have their value as well, even if the tangible product of it of you, like all this practice and all this work, whatever that may be. So like it may be that you put in a lot of work and then you realize that you're maybe not that great of a singer because, like, as you said, that innate talent, genetics, your environment, like so many things that play a role into what makes a person good in what they do. I think that, like, because you don't realize all of that, but then the time that you do spend like practicing or giving something that you want to achieve might also be a great opening to lead you in another direction, or to just make you grow in general. I think we kind of talked about this in one of our other episodes. It's like everything adds up as well. And so, like, maybe you put in a lot of work, like maybe it might not be 10,000 hours, but you still put in a lot of time into, like, singing or playing the piano or whatnot. And I think that for people who get really wrapped up into this idea that, but I put in X amount of time and I'm still not good at the guitar, or I'm still not good at, like, football or something like that. Like, I was in basketball for like 3 or 5 years or something like that, and I'm not good at it. You know what I mean? Whether I put in the time or not. But I was able to learn how to, like, one, stand up for myself a little bit, because I was obviously the shortest
to, like,
in the team. Yes. Yeah. And I had to, like, learn how to not be afraid to see the ball coming and to see other people, coming at me, and maybe not being like, oh, please don't, but actually be able to, like, how to navigate those things and, like, form a certain level of discipline, like, not a lot because I'm still working on that, but at a certain level of, like, I had to show up for practice. I had to, like, do this and that. And so, like, yeah, I put in some time. Doesn't mean I was going to go into basketball professionally or anything, but learned and acquired these skills that then later on served me for something else.
Yeah,
entirely. So I think that it's like, it's also that thing of, like, you put in the time for what you want, but always leave room for a little bit of that unexpected of what can come out of putting in the time for something, and not getting such a narrow vision that it's like it's either this or nothing.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of what you were saying at the beginning of your idea about, like, side things. Like, in my mind, it's kind of sounded like side quests, like if you've ever played a video game. Zelda's a good example of this. Like, the latest Zelda games are like, I am stuck at the last bit of Tears of the Kingdom with Link, because I am about to go kill the big boss, but I'm not strong enough to do it. My husband finished it like a month before. So we were both at the same level, and he finished it, and like a month before I tried to do it, and I was like, "Wow, how did you do it? And why are you so much stronger than me?" Like it's the same game. There's no point. There's no reason why you should be stronger than me. And then he opened his quest log, and he's done every single side quest available. So it wasn't just that you can, because you can get fixated in the main quest. Like in my mind, I started that game. I'm gonna go kill Ganondorf. That's my goal. So I'm just gonna. But he did all of the side quests that gave him more money or more power or more health, or gave him different things. And so now I'm like, oh, I have to go back and do all those stupid quests I didn't do. So then I'm like I've been stuck because I don't want to go. And also I sold all of the things I kept like winning. I sold it all, so I'm a millionaire, but I can't like enhance my clothes because I don't have the things that I necessarily, because I sold them. Whereas he like did all the side quests and kept all those things. And it's a bit of a metaphor. It's a bit cheesy, and I get it, but it just reminded me of that, like how much those side quests in life add up. And again, another reason, and I'm not here to take that like break down the theory or anything, because I used to believe in it a lot, and I think there's some value to it. But it's another thing that breaks it too, because we're sum of all our parts. As a creative or as a person, it's one and the same. We can't, as much as we try to like severance like our brain, we can't do that in this world. Like, it's impossible. So if you're a better person or a better human, if you take better care of yourself, inevitably you're going to be better at other things. And so I think that 10,000 hours aren't not just necessarily like, oh yeah, 10,000 hours in this one field. It's intentional time, of course, in the thing you want to do, but also intentional time in everything you do. Be it, I'm going to be intentional taking care of myself. I'm going to be intentional spending this time making music or making art or thinking creatively, learn from other thinkers, read books, like all those things. Do it intentionally. And I think especially nowadays with the dual screen culture that we have, it's so easy to like not be intentional with people, relationships, like to conversations, and try to lead as much as possible and try to keep those things, and not sell them. I guess like it's my analogy, I guess. Yeah. Because now I'm stuck and I can't kill the big boss because I'm too weak, because I didn't do all those things I should have done intentionally, all of those things. So it's the same. It's like in every side quest will add strength to your main quest. And it's just, looking at it that way, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy, honestly. And I feel like I hadn't done a good job in explaining myself, but you like summed it up perfectly, because it's true. And it's like a main like river with streams, right? Yeah. Like they feed off each other. And so like definitely part of those 10,000 hours can also be some of these other things that are around it. And then those 10,000 hours, quote unquote, that you put into something, it will also feed the other areas of your life. So it's like kind of seeing those synergies and not compartmentalizing, as you were saying. And then I think that we might not have time to like get fully into it, and it might be like a great topic actually for another episode, because it's one of those bigger kind of philosophical questions. But I think for me, one of the weakest points of the theory is that it's like it promises this expertise or mastery. And I feel like nowadays we're like so bombarded and so filled with the idea of an expert and people like, giving you advice and telling you what you have to do. I mean, even SEO really favors those articles or titles with the how to 5 steps for, and all these sorts of things. And while I think there are some fields more so than others where you can like achieve a certain level of mastery in an area with like very intentional practice. Like I was watching an interview with a baseball player, I think was baseball player the other day and stuff, and they were saying like, I'm even in my hotel room, I'm like practicing how to like, I don't know how you call this action, because I know nothing about okay, swing. I know nothing about baseball. And they were saying like, yeah. Oh, well, whatever. You understood what I was trying to say. But they were like, I'm practicing all the time. And now I'm like, and developing that muscle memory, like you were saying. I would, I have no idea how many hours this guy has put in. But I'm like, there is, obviously he has a certain level of mastery. But also, it's like in some other areas, like, all these life coaches that have emerged or whatnot. It's like, what even makes you an expert in, what even is that? And I think that now more than ever, just because of the amount of access to information that we have, of which I'm a big proponent, like, don't get me wrong, but we have to develop that more like greater critical eye in thinking like, what even is an expert? Who am I listening to? Who am I learning from? What am I actually, learning? Because also you might be putting in your 10,000 hours from someone who actually has no idea what they're talking about. And that can be part of your own learning journey. So I think just kind of like being a little bit critical of that and not assuming that because like, and we go back to that point of like quality over quantity, right? Not because someone has, a 1,000 YouTube videos telling like how to organize your finances, they are actually an expert in that area. So I don't know. I think that just like the whole aspect of calling someone an expert or mastery is a little bit different because you can definitely develop a high level of skill in something, but like what does becoming an expert entail? And and if it's like something we should even be like, it's even worth pursuing. Like, do we want to maybe achieve like high skill and all of that? I agree, but I don't know, just the whole idea of the expert, to me, it's one of those things that I just look at with a bit of suspicion, just naturally.
I think expertise comes with knowing that you're not an expert. I think that's what tells you that an expert is a real expert, when they're like, back to I only know that I know nothing. When you know so much that you know that you don't know. Like when you can grasp so much about a concept that you know that there's so much more to learn. And when you talk to real experts, that's always what they're going to say. They're constantly learning, constantly trying new things. Which is why, and this is not to go into a tangent, but like the area of experts that I have the biggest gripe with is social media experts. Because bro, the algorithm changes every single minute. Like you can learn the current algorithm inside out, but then tomorrow Meta launches another thing and then you're back to square one. So you cannot promise that your expert material is going to help me get 1 million followers, which is why slow and steady wins the race always. And I do it for a living. Slow and steady wins the race always. Good content, good quality content. Even though we have currently like 120 followers, that's more than zero, and slow and steady wins the race, because all of these like experts ways are like, if you're telling me you're an expert and you know everything, for me, giant red flag. Yeah, because
totally.
The real experts, those people who you hear from them on interviews, they're like hungry to continue to develop their craft. They're hungry to learn more. They're hungry to be cross disciplinary. Like, not just, okay, maybe I learned the guitar and now I want to learn a different instrument, or I want to, like, it's people that are hungry. I think that's what shows you that's a real expert. Like the people that know that there's more to learn. And I always say, like, if you're just too cocky with your area of expertise, okay, you probably know a lot about things. It doesn't necessarily mean you don't. But if you're too cocky, then you don't. There's some like pride there. And because what you're saying, we can probably go into this later in a whole kind of episode dedicated to I guess knowing things or expertise or whatnot. Because as you were saying, you can you can have expertise on things, but But it comes in my mind. It must come with also knowing that there's so much more to explore in every area of life.
Yeah, totally. And, I think that like nowadays, especially with so many of this vanity metrics, like likes and follows, whatever, it can also give that illusion of expertise and skill. And I think that's also one of my beefs with the theory. It's that it assumes that a number tells the whole story.
And it doesn't.
And I think that, and it really doesn't. Like, I don't care how many followers someone has. Like, it might not tell me anything about what they actually know. And there's some people who don't even know what Instagram is, who might actually be way more like, knowledgeable and skilled or whatever in an area. As well as like, and then, but on the flip hand of that, just to like, obviously, as I said, I see both sides of the argument. I think that if we take the 10,000 hours more loosely, as you said, more as a like an idea, and a principle, I think that precisely one of the strong points, if we take it from that angle, one of the strong points of the theory is that it does at least communicate and reflect how much it takes to achieve something. Because I feel like, especially again, because of this vanity metrics, sometimes a song or a clip or something can go so viral. All those overnight successes are usually not overnight successes. Like there's a lot that has gone behind, a lot of time and effort and sacrifice and failures and like falling down and getting up. And like, and I think that, to the theory's credit, I think that at least with communicating or giving this idea of 10,000 hours, because that's a lot of time. I have no idea how much that is. I think it's like
years.
It's like yeah, I think the way he phrased it in the book was like to translate about 20 hours of practice per week over 10 years of something, of like whatever it is.
How
And
many?
so
10,000 hours of practice. What did you
per
say?
week over 10 years.
20 hours of practice per
Per
week.
week.
10 years. Okay.
Yeah. Which is something that like honestly, depending on like your lifestyle, might not even be achievable. So it might even take longer. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I think of someone who's like training to be an actor or like going to school for design or what have you, like whatever it is, on top of parenting and on top of full-time work or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe you might not be able to put in more, or learning a new language. Like you might not be able to put in more than actually like 10 hours a week. That would be realistic. And that means like
That's still so many hours.
and that's still a lot of hours. So mastery, quote unquote, if we go by this theory, would take you at that point, if we cut the 20 hours in half, it would take you 20 years. And so I think if we take it like as a more of a metaphorical thing, I think one of the values of it is that it does at least reflect how hard it is and how much it takes to achieve something in a world, especially now, where we're so used to to immediacy, to like not having patience to wait for something, to wanting that very mythical overnight success. Because I had just said it's like it's rarely actually overnight, but I think that there's a craving for it. And so I think that to the at least to the theory's credit, I think that what underscores or was implicit in saying 10,000, it's the fact that it's a lot, and that it will require commitment and intentionality, as we've said.
Yeah, I think, and I agree with that. And I think also, in as alluding to something you said already earlier, that this like vanity metrics, I think part of also, like, I guess part of if you subscribe to the idea that intentionality and time make a master, then also it's important to take a look at the right metrics or the right feedback. And not necessarily, this light just turned off, by the way. I don't know why, but it just turned off.
Okay.
But anyways, it's like taking a look at the right metrics or the right measurements, the right feedback, or whatever success means to you, because a lot of people right now place value in people, because people still blow up in a month. Like people still, they are extremely talented, really good writers, or really good at like playing the algorithm, and they really invest time and effort into it. I honestly, even though I do it for a living, cannot be bothered to keep up with every single thing that happens every single day. So I try to have like a more overall knowledge of what works and what doesn't. But some people are like obsessed over things, and they blow up immediately, or they blow up in like a month. Like in a month, they gain 50, 60, like 70,000 followers. And that's great. But people place a lot of value in that. And that really that's not a proof that you are a master at something. That just proves that you could do one thing right. And also, and this is probably my closing thought, also the 10,000 hours don't mean that you have to, like, it doesn't mean that you have to put in 10,000 hours to be able to be an actor. Because if you're an actor, that first gig you book is part of the 10,000 hours. Like that mindset that if you don't put in the 10,000 hours, you can't do what you want to do. It's not true, because you doing what you want to do is part of the effort that you're putting in. So maybe someone wants to be a published author, and they don't want to start the novel until they put in 10,000 hours of writing. No, you writing your novel is you putting in the time. So it's like doing the thing is what makes you be better at the thing. And also, the more you do the thing, the more you realize which areas of that come naturally to you. There's things that don't come naturally to me. Like, I am not a naturally gifted athlete, for example. Like, whenever I want to be active, and I want to do sports, and I want to do all these things, but it takes even double the effort and intentionality to get things right. Whereas my husband picks up a racket, swings a racket, hits a ball, perfect swing. Never played tennis. Whereas I spent like 5 years of my life like in tennis lessons, and I still can't get the hang of, so it's just those things. The more you do a thing, the more you realize which aspects of your creative journey come naturally to you, and which aspects need more work. And that's normal, because not everything, unlike the like romanticized idea that when you do something that is not like a job you're gonna be living, not everything's gonna be like that. You're always gonna have to do things that don't come naturally to you, and that's normal. But then you can learn where those things are and where those things that come naturally to you are too, and the more you do the thing. So I think my last thought is like, don't let the idea that you need to spend X amount of time doing something stop you from doing the thing. And this is a thought for me too, because it can very easily like play into perfectionism, and you can think, oh, if I haven't put in this time, then I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna try to publish my book. I'm not gonna do it. No, that's the time you've put in. Celebrate it,
Yeah, totally. I think my closing thought would be like, don't wrap up your identity in your doing. Like, don't intermingle your being and your being and your doing, because I think that for a lot of people who really like these metrics and who really like the quantity aspect of like the achievement of a goal, and that's why we have ideas like the SMART goals and things like that, like we like things that we can measure, boxes that we can check. I think like, don't get too wrapped up into like, am I achieving the 10,000, whether it's like, if you take it literally and like you're achieving the 10,000 hours, or like even if you break it down and you're like, oh, I need to practice X amount of hours per week, or I need to have done this by this point in my life or whatever. Like, don't get your identity wrapped up in it, because life is full of unforeseen circumstances. And I'm not saying with this like, oh, let's just give ourselves a pass for every time that we don't do it. But I think we kind of talked about it in our life mottos as well, and it's just like that idea of also giving ourselves grace and giving life an opportunity to happen, because like within that process of learning and like putting in your 10,000 hours, whatever, it's like, as you said, like you might find that you actually, one of those side quests actually ended up being more appealing to you than your original main quest. But you wouldn't have gotten to that point if you wouldn't have started on that journey or whatever. So just like kind of leaving that room for life to happen, and knowing that, whatever the result, it doesn't mean you're, whether you achieve it, then don't be like, so boastful and prideful that you become that kind of not humble expert, in which you realize that yes, you've gotten somewhere, but you still have such a long way to go. Which I think, and even like the Bible says that like, pride is people's downfall sometimes. And so like, not getting to that point, but also not getting to that point where if the outcome is not what we expected, because that can happen as well, regardless of the effort that we put into something, it doesn't mean that you're like worthless and and the worst, and a failure in your life is going to amount to nothing, and you should have never picked this up, because along the way you probably did pick up things that built you up as a person, built you as a character. So I think that like sometimes with this quantity based metrics, I think that might be sometimes the danger, depending on like the mental state and how strong of a self like identity you have or whatnot, and what your identity is rooted on. I think it can be a little bit dangerous if you're just like laser focused on achieving a number, a numeric result, that you lose sight of just the value of the process, I think, in your like own character development or whatnot. So
absolutely,
that's I guess that's my closing thoughts. But before we actually wrap up this episode, Juli, can you tell us something that you have enjoyed this week, that you either read or watched or listened to, something that truly like inspired you this week? That you would like to recommend?
I wasn't ready. Something that I either read or saw or listened to this week that I would like to recommend. I am currently reading. I haven't finished it, but I'm reading. I say reading because I'm listening to it through Audible. Erwin McManus's latest book called Mind Shift. And it's about principles to, he calls it like principles to unleash your inner genius. But he basically goes into some of the principles that he used in his life as someone that had like, and still has like a bit of ADHD and panic disorder and all those things, for him to kind of shift that mentality of I am these things to now I can think like a genius. And it's a really cool, it's a really cool listen. I love Erwin McManus. I think he's one of the most amazing creative minds that are currently alive in the world, and he's such a delight and a joy to listen to. And the book is narrated by him, so which makes it cool because it feels like it's just like a podcast kind of thing. If you want to listen to the audiobook, but I'm sure it's also a good read. So yeah, that's been really good. Yeah, that's my peak of the week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'll recommend the new album by Treno. Treno is our young Argentine rapper. And I incidentally saw the interview he did with, I don't know if it was not Vanity Fair, Cosmopolitan or GQ. I think it was GQ probably. And the next day I listened to his album, and in that interview he was breaking down some of his more iconic songs. And then I listened to the album, and I could definitely see where he was coming from with some of the answers he gave. And he, to me, is, and even like I've learned more about the rap scene in Latin America and in Spanish. But I think that even with my little knowledge, because I'm not a great expert, I would say he's probably one of the best that I've heard and one of the like best voices. And I think that he has a very like bright, well, he already has a very bright present, but like he'll probably continue to be very big, because I think one of the things that inspired me from him, that inspired me about his career, but I was very evident in the album, is how loyal he is to his root, like how authentic he is to what he wants to do. And like whether it goes mainstream or not, he's very true to himself and to his roots and to his project, basically to what he wants Treno to be, but at the same time is not scared of experimenting a little bit. So I kind of like that, because it's like that experimentation is part of who he is, but his influences, what formed him, is still very much present. So because like he has some songs that are maybe a little bit more flirting with dancehall. For example, he has a song that's kind of dancehall-y, which is a little bit different from what he does. But then you see like his parts that are rapped or whatever, it's like very him. Or like what he says, it's very him. So I don't know. I just found it like such a refreshing, like a breath of fresh air in the urban music scene at the moment in Latin America. And all this coming from like a 21, 22-year-old like person is just mind-blowing to me. So I like highly recommend it. Yeah,
I'll give it a listen. So I haven't listened to it yet, but it's on my list.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we will leave you with those ideas, those recommendations, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the 10,000 hour theory, on its validity, any points that you think, are great and you apply in your own life, and or how the theory has helped you, or if you think, as I said at the beginning, it's absolute rubbish and why, or somewhere in the middle. We love the grace on this podcast as well. So with that, we'll end this episode here. And remember that you can follow us at MashtiaCo on Instagram and TikTok.
See you next week.
And you can also subscribe to our
subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really helps us. Yeah. Really, really helps us. And rate all of the things that everybody asks you to do. It does really help. So thank you so much.
Totally. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.